So Tiger, opening comments, please.
Good afternoon.
And talk as close to the mic as possible so we can get a good
As you
signal.
can see, it grew beyond me. I've asked Luke Bodensteiner, my Executive Vice President of Athletics, to join us. And to my right, Chip Knight, our National Development Director. And on the end, Rory Macumber, Vice President of Athlete Career and Education and the Academy. So I will have a broad number of people that I can deflect questions to. So anyhow, it's really pretty much open forum, and we'll just take questions as they go, and we've got an hour, and happy to spend that time if it goes that long. Tom's our spotter.
So who wants to kick it off here?
First question is always the hardest.
Okay, that was great. Thanks, everybody.
Right over here.
I knew he would do it.
Break, guys.
So I like the work that I see that you're doing with the core values. My question is there a new strategic plan, or is there a current strategic plan you're working off of? And maybe you can inform us of that process.
Yeah, so in 2010, there was a committee formed that was called the Strategic Planning Committee. And its purpose at the time was to develop a sport allocation model, which they did in 2010. And then this year we reconvened that committee. And it's a little bit of a misnomer. The output from that committee is basically a sport allocation model, which Luke and I will use to help guide us in decision-making for sport allocation, unrestricted revenue, sport allocation to sports across the board. That is a component of strategic planning. We really consider our strategic planning process to be our long-term 2 to 5 year planning, which we kick into as soon as we get through these meetings. Preceding these meetings, we went through extensive staff meetings and then 1 year plans, which have been presented to staff and approved, and that's the whole budgeting process that rolls into May 1. And then by the end of the summer, we'll actually produce and publish our strategic plan. But the sport allocation model is available now. Charlotte, what did we end up with as far as distribution? I mean, one of the things we want to do is make it available to everybody at Congress. We consider this really intellectual property of our own and would rather not see it widely distributed beyond these shores, but certainly available to anybody in the U.S. and in this group, absolutely. So, Charlotte.
Right, it's gone out to Board of Directors, Board of Trustees. Sorry, it sounds like it's buzzing. Board of Directors, Board of Trustees, our committee, and then will be discussed by Board of Directors on Sunday. Assuming there are no major concerns out of that meeting, it will then go up and be accessible to anyone with a USSA membership number on the website. So, and if you don't have a number and you want to see it, also feel free to just grab me and I can get you a copy. Unless you have a Norwegian or an Austrian accent, and then you can't have it because it's confidential.
What about Russian and French?
Australian.
We'll tell my wife. Australian. Anna goes.
Yes, in the front, Aldo.
Can you share with us what the amount of revenue is generated annually by athlete fees, meaning the fees that they're paying to USSA for their participation as the national team, and any ideas in terms of moving into the future, how you might help relieve that burden from the athletes?
Yes, that's a great question. So we think, I mean, call it what you like, call it a funding gap, but the money that we ask the athletes to pay to cover their travel is around $2 million. And this past year, we had a allocation from our endowment of a little under $100,000, and we applied it on a need basis. We hope to augment that by another $100,000 this year. So while it sounds pretty meek as only 10% of the total amount, but when it's applied on a need basis, it goes quite a bit further than if it were just flat across the board. There is an endowment campaign that will kick off relatively soon. It's in its nascent stages now, and a major component of that campaign is to raise enough money to put into endowment to cover that bill, essentially. And so everybody knows the way we essentially got ourselves into that position. Look at it any way you like, but essentially we grew our sports and grew our rosters considerably from a little over 100 to 180 athletes in a pretty big hurry as all these new sports came online in the last 5 years. And our funding into athletics, the amount of money we're able to put into athletics has gone from, during that time, a low of 12 to a high of about 14 million. Next year it's about 14.9, almost 15 million. So when you add all of that staff and all of that travel on top of what we already had, and you have basically flat funding, that was the only way to field the teams and to expand the sports. And it has a long history to it, so there's always this endless debate with an athlete who makes the national team, should everything be paid for at that point? And at this point, the answer is we can't do that. Only the highest levels of our national teams. And we ask them to pay their own board. It's somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000 an athlete. We're trying to do a couple of other things to help make that easier too. One of which is the fundraising method through crowd raising, of course, which is Rally Me, and actually setting up accounts, training the athletes how to use it so they can be advocates for themselves. And at the same time, we now, because we have a direct restricted funding model where Trish's team and our donors are able to donate directly to a part of a team or a team, then that avenue is open to have dedicated fundraisers and other vehicles like that that have been used successfully this year. Cross country is kind of the poster child for that, but Alpine did it also in terms of a particular one gender, one part of the team. They had some strong advocates that wanted to hold a fundraiser for them, and they did it and covered a big chunk of the costs for those athletes. And it's that type of alternative funding models that we're looking at, because we can't afford to cannibalize our existing donor base. We can't go to them and have them suddenly turn everything into restricted funding because we won't be able to fund our general programs. But we can go to them with a la carte programs and additional ways in which they can be involved and support athletes more directly in terms of their personal travel costs. And that's been working off and on, but there's lots of different models too. There's different regions of the country. NNF has been tremendous in the cross-country side, T2 with the athletes that they support, and other organizations like that. So we're trying to get there. I would hope we could get there quickly. I said this morning that I hope we can close that gap in 5 years, and I don't know what closing that means, whether it means completely eliminating all costs to the athlete once they're on a trip with the U.S. ski team or snowboard or free skiing teams, or whether that means that that's drastically reduced. But to get from here to here is going to take time, and it's hopefully going to be not that long, but it's not going to be a jump from needing $2 million contributed by the athletes themselves all the way down to zero.
Other questions?
Thanks for taking our questions, Tiger, and the rest of your staff there. In terms of recapping this past year and then looking forward, where do you see that you've done a good job? Where can you pat yourself on the back and say we've met X, Y, Z goals? And what do you see as the most obvious challenges or issues that you need to deal with in the next 1 to 3 years?
Well, I would say the first thing I would do is pat this guy on the back. Our athletic teams really, really did well. I mean, the best in the world goal, we achieved that in the ways in which we measure it. Again, I always like to say we're always needing to defend that, and we're always challenged for that, but our athletic success this winter was really amazing. If I were to pat myself on the back, I would say I'm very proud of the people that work for me and some of the newer people we brought on board, and look forward to working with them into the future. And I'm very proud of the outreach that we've initiated this year and the opportunity to interact with so many people and listen to them and understand what, the greater community believes is the right way for us to do the things we know we need to get done. And I think as an organization, and you may not see this as much externally, but internally, I think we've become very good at, getting in a room, all of us, my executive team or whatever group of management staff, and hammering it out on the whiteboard and saying, okay, what are we trying to do? Let's just start from scratch again with a particular area, whether it's membership, whether it's metrics measuring athletics, whether it's development, whether it's academics. I mean, what are we really trying to do here? Because it's so easy for an organization this diverse to try to end up just sort of wandering and sort of jumping on the shiny pennies or putting out the fires as you go. But if you don't have a true strategic goal and objective for everything you're trying to do, and then just keep your eyes on that, while you're running through the woods, you need to know where you're going. And so I think I feel like we're getting pretty good at that. I think we have a good process in place, and we have a lot of frank, open discussion within ourselves, within our groups, and then externally you've seen that too. So I guess that's what I'd say. Challenges? Let me count the ways. Money is always a challenge. Both fundraising and through our commercial partners as well as licensing. Those are three areas that we need to grow considerably. That weighs heavily on Mike's shoulders and Tricia's shoulders. They've made great strides. We have places to go. We have things we need to fix, and part of that is IT-based, our website and our app. Oh, that's right, we don't have one. Things like that, sort of fundamental vehicles in the case for Mike and marketing to have the inventory to sell. The online digital advertising is, that's the wave of the future as of 10 years ago. And we're getting there. But I mean, we joke about this stuff. You ought to see us joke internally about some of the internal systems we have. But those are the challenges. It's really money. Luke's getting the results, figuring out where to focus our resources moving forward. And when I say that, generally I mean unrestricted funding that we receive or we generate through all the different ways we generate revenue. But that's going to be the challenge of this organization, is how to take it to the next level. And things like NASTAR, while that's not really a revenue generator immediately, it's at least about, it's not going to consume our resources other than Callum's attention, many of the mind share of us in this room, but we think the benefit of that long run helps us grow the organization. And so once we have the digital assets that we can sell, if we have 400,000 NASTAR participants that count amongst that audience, that'll make a big difference. I mean, I'm just saying if we could grow it past about 100,000 today.
For those of you who have just come in, we have plenty of seats over on this side. You can sneak in front if you want. It's okay, or you can sneak around to the other door. And for those of you watching the live stream online, remember you can send your questions to hashtag USSA Congress 15. Other questions from the audience here?
I've answered a couple, so these guys are up next.
Yes, Daryl, if we get a mic here in front.
This question's for Luke. Luke, we experienced some tremendous results with Nordic this year, the likes of which you've never seen. How do we keep that momentum going in the future? What's your roadmap and your strategy to continue with the winning success?
Yeah, you asked about Nordic, and that's been actually a very interesting result of sort of a long-term collaboration with clubs. And I spoke about it a little bit at the Club Excellence Seminar in my comments there. And really, that's a place where we assessed ourselves a while ago as being vastly outgunned by the nations that we have to compete against. Not only in terms of financial resources, but also in a lot of ways of culture and systems and participation in some ways. And, really, the kind of performance that you've seen over the last few years is very much a result of allowing our clubs, or really working with our clubs, for those clubs to take athletes to the highest level they possibly can. And that's happened. There's been, I would say, a really kind of incredible evolution of the club system, or the club group in cross-country skiing. There's been a good professionalization of the clubs. There's been a good proliferation of clubs. We've got a lot of participation. We've got a lot of kids, most importantly, probably training very, very hard at young ages. And so, I think despite the fact that, we're still outspent by many, many-fold in that arena, it's the quality and the work of what's happening at the club level has allowed us to really, be in a lot of ways competitive with the best nations in the world, even though we spend a lot less, because there's a fairly big burden that's being shouldered, but the job is getting done at the club level. So I see it, I really see it being sustainable and something that will continue to grow.
Other questions? Yes, Otto?
Toss this one at Jory. Jory, could you report a little bit on what sort of initiatives you're working on in terms of the athlete career development piece, and if there's any efforts to leverage all the great connections among our foundation trustees and help to ensure a smooth transition from athletics to careers for our top athletes?
Thank you. In terms of initiatives or accomplishments this year, the poster board one of that is extending the agreement with Westminster College, where they give us 600 credit hours per year to U.S. ski and snowboard team athletes. It's an agreement started in 2005 and was in danger of being crossed out, and now with a new president, they're recommitted to it, and has a lot of success both in the athletic and academic growth of students. So this year, for instance, there are 22 Westminster students who competed in World Champs or X Games, winning 8 medals. And to have that kind of connection in their academic path as well as their athletic path is really important. Connected to that, in the college world, we also have agreements with Utah State and DeVry, and we also have a college tuition reimbursement program for U.S. team athletes or snowboard athletes that are attending college, where they can get partial tuition reimbursement in the college path. Just 2 days ago, when I met with the foundation, I said that a student, if they attend another school, can get up to $5,000 of their tuition reimbursed. If they're not at Westminster, it's free. And I said, my dream is every U.S. ski and snowboard team athlete who goes to school while their team member gets to go to college for free. That's the fundraising goal in the long run. So that's where I'm working on fundraising going forward. And I've done a little data analysis of, does it actually help performance, right? I mean, it's nice. It's really important that people go to school and have an education, have options when they retire, but it has to help performance as well. And just looking at last year's, from the 13 team to the 14 team, who was on the team and if they took a class or not. Took a college class, separated that into 2 groups, and it's about 50-50. It's about half the athletes. The athletes that took at least one college class, 60% of them either stayed on their team level or moved up. So their performance was good enough to stay on the C or B team or move up to the A team or B team. And about half the athletes didn't take a college course, and 40% of those athletes either stayed in the same place or moved up. So in that one small sample of 1 year, does it mean, is it a guarantee you'll move up if you take a college class? But no, but it shows that there is a correlation, some sort of factor of if you're engaging the mind, it can help with your performance as well. At least it doesn't detract from it. And anecdotally, you hear that a lot from athletes. I take this break, the mental break, I really needed it. I'm bored on the road, it gives me something else to look at. And that's actually was the hope coming out of the Olympic Committee task force that Luke chaired, that having an education career path would improve performance and longevity in the sport. In terms of transition, the second one is I'm creating essentially a career coaching program. We are a USSA leadership program that works to certain career type skills. And actually, we're starting with the fundraising challenge that our athletes have, and using that need to raise money to build certain skills around how do they create their own personal image, their own personal brand, how they deliver that effectively over social media so that they create followers and they get the right kind of image, how that can then get rolled into using it in Rally Me and meeting with donors to get financial support. Their story is engaging and interesting, and we want to help them. And eventually, when they, someone like Jessie Diggins wins a medal, all of a sudden she can turn that into a profit for her. She can get sponsorships out of that and have those skills to go forward there. So we're starting with that because that's right in the need place of the athletes. We're also working on public speaking skills, interview skills, because they're doing that all the time. We're using the trustees for financial education, networking skills, and internships to start to expose them to different things that they could go forward. Actually, one example, and it isn't just like I'm going to retire next year. Andy Newell came in. He's going to go through at least through the Olympics, but he wants us to be a good cross-country skier. He wants to plan way out ahead. He's not a, but I won't make fun of another sport, but cross-country skiers look ahead, right? They make a plan. And as we kind of went through, what are you interested in and what are you passionate about, he had two things. One of them was environmental activism, and the other was elevating the sport of cross-country skiing in the United States. So those kind of two broad things, and from there we can start to make a plan of internships, experiences, connections to make that over the next 4 years. So when he does retire in 18 or 19, he has a series of experiences and skills that he can then take on to whatever he does next. So.
Thanks. Other questions from the audience? Yes, right here. Microphone, please.
This is for Tiger. My name is Brant Krause, and I'm a U.S. ski cross athlete. From my understanding, the Gold Pass program sometimes has leftover passes. Would it be possible for USSA to allocate Gold Passes to the ski cross side in freestyle to hire a potential coach for upcoming seasons, or even next season?
That's a very good question.
Man's done his
Our
research.
Gold Pass program falls in the category of what we call unrestricted. We made an exception with Nordic Combined last year, which is going through this year. The reason we did that is because it was a rather quick and short notification change from the funding level that they were at to the funding level that we are now at with them. We are working very closely, and they are, with donor bases that they have, that we have, and what I was talking about, the restricted ability now, so for donors to be able to restrict gifts, and we will work very closely with any athlete, any sport, in enabling that. So the answer to the question is we should talk. That particular program, probably not. That was a one-time exception, and that's the slippery slope that we can't afford to go down, is taking unrestricted programs and making them restricted. I know that sounds like a long sentence, but I can explain what that means. But there are plenty of ways that we can work directly with you, your teammates, and any of the teams that fall into, and when you see the sport allocation model that this committee has developed, it talks a lot about exactly the vehicles for funding that we can use and we can develop. So it's a long answer.
Other questions? Yes, Daryl? Wait, can you wait for the mic, please?
Pass it down.
Governance. What are the plans? We just went through in the Alpine community, getting all of our regional affiliates aligned on an affiliation agreement. What are the plans for the other sports under USSA? The timing to perhaps do the same? And are there any plans to change governance as we know it today?
Well, first of all, to answer the last question first, I look at governance as something that's always evolving. So I would hope it is always changing. There's no grandiose plan to make massive changes. The affiliation agreement that we negotiated and we created and essentially signed up, so to speak, all of the alpine divisions in the country, essentially memorializing in a verbal agreement that had been going on for 30 years or more. How they work with us, how we work with them, what we expect the divisions do, what the divisions expect us to do. That was a very lengthy but interesting process because it made it very clear all the things that everybody thought everybody else should be doing. And we were able to find middle ground and get that done. The next sport that is probably on the radar for that is cross country, and it makes very much sense. It's every sport's organized so differently. Cross country is somewhat similar to alpine that way, but there's some independent organizations that really haven't had that much to do with USSA that have become quite strong that we're partnering with. So it's different in that sense. Whereas the divisions of USSA were laid out years ago, post-World War II, so to speak, and they basically operated very successfully for a long period of time. So there was a governance structure in place there. So to say that there's going to be an affiliation agreement in snowboard or in freestyle, I don't know. I mean, there are such different models, and snowboarding is a great example with USASA really representing the lower part of the pyramid in terms of elite athlete ascension up to the world levels, where we have a pretty good working arrangement now that we want to make it a lot more formal if we can and make sure that we're helping each other as much as possible. And that, is that an affiliation agreement? It could be, but it wouldn't actually be a divisional affiliation agreement since they represent the whole country in free skiing and snowboarding youth. And we've already worked out a lot of things verbally again, but is there a way we can take that to another level? So in that sense, that's the way I look at governance as ongoing and changing, shifting with the winds as needed for our sports, whatever the nuance of the sport is, and however we think we need to move forward. And that takes it takes leadership. It takes people understanding what the goal is of trying to do things like that. And that's kind of our next frontier, I think, now that we've accomplished this in Alpine. Although in Alpine there's plenty to do to make sure those relationships stay strong. We fulfill our needs, and our requirements on that side of the deal. And governance just within Alpine, and then some of that can be mimicked to other sports where it fits, but the business model across different sports is so different, it's just dramatically different. And we've got to pay attention to that and make sure the experts in those sports tell us how it should be structured.
Just a reminder to those of you watching us online, you can send your questions to hashtag USSA Congress 15 on Twitter, or simply use the chat forums on live stream. Other questions from the audience?
Tiger, I know that we focus a lot on skier excellence and metrics of podiums and Olympics and World Championships. Many of the clubs focus, obviously, a lot of their energy on training, on technique, and athlete development to a certain stage. But it seems like that when athletes get to the world levels, there may be a disconnect, or there may be an added emphasis on psychological training. Can you address that, or any of your panel there, on what the USSA, US team does for the psychological components of competitors?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is have Luke answer that, because we have quite an extensive psychological sports psychology effort going, but then there's also a component of that which I think falls under coaches' education of how we can disseminate that, what are kind of best practices, what are our key elements there. And I think that's what is a good example, something that happens on the front line, so to speak, at the elite level, that can be disseminated down through the club system. But I'll let Luke talk about what we're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Really, as Tiger said, the system that we deploy through the teams, at least, is based on a consultant model, and we have 5 consultants in our team who are trained as applied performance psychologists, and we choose to use those kind of professionals really because it establishes a better interplay between the athlete, the consultant and the coach versus what would be known as a clinical model. We do use clinical consultants in kind of clinical cases, but that's a minority of what we do. The consultants that we use are really, they're all located here in the proximity of Park City to facilitate kind of the day-to-day interchange, well, week-to-week interchange, I should say, with the athletes who are typically training here, but we do deploy those people out into the field as well. That said, like many of our programs, it's a small-ish program, and of course we benefit from putting more resource into it or having a bigger program so that the athletes would have more access to those professionals, and that's so we could get it out kind of more across all the teams. It's a model that's both individual consultation as well as a skill development program. And as we get down sort of deeper into the teams or younger into the ages, it becomes more skills based. And I think that's really started to open up an opportunity for us as we've looked at how we educate coaches in the clubs. Of course, they're not going to be trained as sports psychologists, but there's a big factor in there for any club coaches or really a coach at any level. Where they can, initiate skills-based training or have some sensitivity to really, how you work with an athlete in that way. So that's an area we're pushing toward. We've been in that space before with educational materials, but it's something we can push farther into. And then one of the other pieces, and this is kind of more in Jory's ballpark, is that when we talk about aspects that are off the field aspects like career and education, transition preparation and things like this, what we're really talking about is balanced lifestyle with the athletes, right? And that's a very healthy thing for the athletes, and also it's also a performance enhancing thing for the athletes. And so that's been a focus of Jory's program really is to help counsel the athletes through this notion of a balanced lifestyle. And we see a lot of benefits from that, just from competitive attention to the length that an athlete is going to participate as an elite athlete, and the duration of their career. So I think that's been a good move. It's been a space we've been in for probably 5 or 6 years with the athletes, and we'll continue down that road. So like I said, it's a very functional program. We got great expertise in there. Like some of the things we do, it's maybe underemphasized, or I guess the desire would be to emphasize more. But of course, we're limited in some of the things that we do. So.
Okay, Chip Knight, our new Alpine Development Director. Chip, we haven't heard from you yet, so do you want to give a few comments maybe on your first month in the new position?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Tom. Literally been here about a month now, and just getting up to speed still. It's been a great week here at Congress, getting out and talking to people. So that's been enjoyable. My charge going forward is to really look at the development system, the Alpine Development Program, from the D team down to the U14 level, through the NTG programs that are in place, and assessing how those programs are doing and how we can get better. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, weaving the program together, refining the NTG program a little bit. We're starting to see some great success there. I still think we can do a little better. And then tying in the regional and U16 and U14 programs going forward. So we're building out the base developmentally and creating podium potential athletes going forward.
Thanks, Chip. Any other questions from the audience? Again, those of you watching online, you can send your questions to hashtag USSA Congress 15. Other questions from the audience here?
I have a question for the audience.
Okay, go ahead.
And that was a great question, Greg, about what are our biggest challenges. I guess I'd ask the group from the outside, when you look at us, what do you consider our largest and biggest challenges to be moving forward? It can't be crickets.
Microphone here, Megan, right here for Daryl.
A new name. He goes first. He's new. Yeah, new voice.
And if you want, you can shout them out. We can repeat them on these mics too.
Okay, just a quick question for you guys. Is there any way that you could possibly name a men's U.S. ski jumping team, even if it's not funded? And I kind of asked that because a lot of different things that you guys provide, like sports psychology, educational opportunities, all of that type of stuff. So I guess that's the question I would have. There you go.
So,
The question was, could you name a team that not have it funded, like ski jumping and ski
team,
cross?
Ski jumping, ski cross, and we've been actually talking quite a lot with men's ski jumping and women's ski jumping just to understand how to best partner and what that means, and how those two entities could best use the shield, so to speak, being official U.S. ski team teams, and what does that mean? And we haven't decided anything, but the answer is sure, we could do that, but there are ways in which everybody's got to understand the way it works, and that involves funding too, and a lot of different things. So there are ongoing discussions. I think we can figure this out. I don't think it's a simple answer. Those are teams, especially ski jumping men's, have really been operating successfully and have done an amazing job of pulling together resources and making a lot of things happen that might not have otherwise. And I'm very interested in seeing how we can support that in, frankly, immediately non-monetary ways, but might be monetary in the long run. So I've been having a lot of discussions. We've been talking a lot with Jeff and Rex and others. So we're open to that, but it's not a real simple answer.
Ski jumping is a great question. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, and that was my sport. And I belonged to one of 3 junior clubs, and we had 150 junior athlete jumpers, and a portion of which were Nordic combined. We had 3 clubs with 30, 40, 50 meter hills. We had one 70-meter hill in the west end of Duluth, all of which are gone. And I now live in Minneapolis, and on my way to my office, when I leave my office, I see that beautiful structure, Bush Lake Ski Jump, which I had a few accidents on over the years. But they're really trying to pull the sport together, and they recently acquired funding. They're going to put plastic on next year, which is going to be very cool. And really with jumping, I think it's visibility. We have to figure out how to get it visible to the public again, because it's an exciting event to watch, and that's what we want. But my comment was not about challenge, it's about an opportunity, and that's with NASTAR. And I think this is the most exciting opportunity that I've seen come along our way since I've been involved in the sport. How do you envision really grabbing hold of that community and getting them to start wearing the USSA banner in terms of membership, crossover, et cetera?
Well, the first thing we want to do is shore it up and make sure nothing slides backwards. I mean, it's been running very well, and we want to make sure we continue to run it very well. A natural association that it's had for a long time, the NASTAR USSA, NASTAR US Ski Team connection. We want to amplify the value of that. We want to elevate the use of the USSA US Ski Team brands amongst NASTAR. There's a large connection there. The most amazing thing about NASTAR is you get on the lift with anybody in the United States and you ask them if they race NASTAR, and they know what the brand is. Maybe they haven't raced it, but they're fully aware of what it is. And we're looking at that now. We did enough strategic planning around NASTAR prior to making the deal with AIM, so to speak, that we knew where we were headed, and now we can really dig in. We almost didn't want to do too much planning because we didn't want to jinx the whole arrangement, and we wanted to make sure that we got it done before we put a ton of resources into it, but we put a lot of thought into it, and we think we have sponsors that'd be very, very interested in being associated with it. It's the right demographic, it's on hill, it's very much the type of thing where there can be activation, sampling of products. There's all kinds of ways to enhance the commercial aspect of it, but also enhance the end user experience in terms of what they do and the social interaction. If anybody in the room uses Strava, you would know what I mean in terms of kind of you take a run on the course and then your friend takes a run on a course on the other side of the country and the two are instantly compared and one's ribbing the other one that I beat you. You know, that sort of thing is really, that's the fun part of it, is, recreating together. And now virtually, whether or not you're in the same part of the planet, You can compare yourselves and recreate together, and those are the types of things that we think we can layer on top and take it to another level, but it's not gonna be easy, and that's why I singled out Callum today, this morning. I'll do it again now because it's under Callum in terms of a part of the operations of the USSA. But we really do look at it as such a great extension of what we're doing. I mean, it's very alpine-centric, but you know, it could also be alpine snowboarding-centric, and then could it be applied in cross-country and other sports? Maybe. You know, we've got to test those waters with our partners in those areas too.
Thanks. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Where's our microphone over there?
Yeah, Tiger, you asked us a few minutes ago what our perception was of some of your biggest challenges. And I think one of our perceptions, or at least mine, is your ability to fully fund national team athletes. Do you guys have, is that a long-term goal of yours? And do you have benchmarks or critical path or targets to get to that point?
It is a long-term goal. Actually, I'd like to think it's not that long. We have a major fundraising initiative underway already that's in, call it the quiet period, that is aimed directly at that. It's only sprinkled a little bit of solution on it so far, but we think within a few short years we can make a major dent towards it. But the goal is to do it through an endowment mechanism so that we can have an amazing story against which to raise the funds, and that people can make gifts that they know will permanently support the athletes that way, and that's part of the personal connection. And on a smaller scale leads to a lot of the mentoring that Jory was pointing towards. So we do have a big effort underway. We'll probably announce sometime next year the new campaign that we're starting, and a major component of that campaign is aimed at directly that. So we're doing an awful lot more than nothing about it. We are dependent on it now. Like I said, it's a $2 million problem, and if we could raise $2 million tomorrow, would we put it all towards that? That would be a strategic allocation we'd have to go through. So I think last year I said we want athletes always to have a certain skin in the game, but we also realize there are a lot of costs outside of just when you're with the U.S. ski or snowboard teams. In other words, moving to Park City to strength and condition train here for the summer, which a lot of the athletes do. Training and equipment costs that are outside of when you're competing with the U.S. teams. So yes, that's a big focus. And are we going to put 100% of our incremental dollars into that as we move forward? No, but we'll put a significant percentage of it towards that. So we know it's a problem. We all talk about the affordability of competing in our sports, and this takes it to another level for sure. And we know that, but we're chipping away at it. Crawford.
Yeah, I know it's a dream, and so much starts with dreams, but I think you should think beyond that. If you want to be a professional organization, your top athletes should be professionals and get paid. Not just by their sponsors.
They are.
By the home team.
And we consider ourselves a major component of a professional league. We have been trying to convince the FIS that these are professional sports and that they operate a professional league. And we want them to do things like to get all the rights back, to handle the TV themselves, to be able to do all these things that a pro sports league would do in our sports. And they are listening. We think we're way ahead of them in some ways, trying to organize this. And yeah, these are professional sports. I consider it professional when you dedicate your life to it, and it has nothing to do with the money. And unfortunately, the money goes the wrong direction a lot, meaning the athletes are paying out a lot of money. But then if you're highly successful in some of our sports, I mean, if somebody making millions of dollars isn't professional, I don't know what is.
Yeah, cool.
We'll talk later, Crawford.
One-word answer.
Over a beer.
Yeah, those of you watching online, you're welcome to send your questions to hashtag USSA Congress 15. We have just a few minutes left. Other questions from the audience here? Yes, microphone, please.
Tiger, I think you asked us about the challenges that we see for you, but I think it's also appropriate to talk about the things that you guys have done really well and the new membership stuff that you have worked through and rolled out this year, in all of the categories and the welcoming style of the new cost levels. Something that we think has been needed for a long time and incredibly welcome, and I hope and think you will find great success in that, and that the numbers of USSA that you guys who do the marketing and hope to have the advertising to sell, the numbers should grow dramatically. So thanks for letting that happen and encouraging that department to do that. I think it'll be a great success.
Thanks, Bill.
Other questions?
Lunch will be
Anybody
served at Market right across the parking lot. Just kidding.
Okay, we have just a few minutes, so any other questions here? And again, those of you on the live stream, you can send your questions to hashtag USSA Congress 15. Any final questions here in the audience in Park City? If not, Tiger, any final comments?
Well, I'd just like to say, I realize this is lunch hour, and we're thrilled to see so many people come here and be interested in having some dialogue. And it's been good, and we're around and able to meet with anybody one-on-one whenever you grab us. I think Crawford's got one more question.
So last year, Tiger and Luke opened themselves up to questions, exposure, embarrassing themselves, defending things, and what was about 8 people there. And so obviously, Tiger, much credit to you. Luke, your staff, for opening yourselves up to challenges, and they're not over yet.
Not until you go back to Colorado.
With that, we thank you for joining us here today. You'll be able to get a copy of this online. Thanks very much. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you tonight at the awards.